Operation Epic Fury. The B-52 Stratofortress has been flexing over Iranian airspace like it completely owns the place. Make sure you are subscribed to Titan Mechanics and hit that bell icon so you never miss a critical military intel update. And let us know where you stand right now in the comments. Drop a 5 if you stand with the US. Press 6 if you back Iran. Or hit 7 if you just want peace. Now, let's look at the intel. There is no question about it. These aviation legends just flew their first dedicated overland bomber missions deep into Iran over the last few days, dropping massive strings of 2,000-pound bunker-busting penetrators straight into hardened underground ammo depots in Isfahan. It hasn't been officially confirmed by the Pentagon yet, but looking at the tactical footprint, it essentially looks like the systematic carpet bombing of Isfahan. President Trump posted verified footage yesterday on Truth Social, showcasing an ammunition depot in Isfahan being neutralized in a highly decisive manner. Let's just say the secondary explosions lit up the night sky for miles, completely vaporizing a key logistical hub tied directly to Iran's ballistic missile program. Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth and Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Keane, just provided a highly classified update on Operation Epic Fury. Here are the critical tactical takeaways you need to know. First, Hegseth confirmed that the Navy aviators shot down by a lucky manpad strike in Kuwait just last night are already back in the cockpit. They immediately flew combat sorties back into Iran. It didn't slow them down for a single second. Hegseth then confirmed that IRGC command bunkers are being relentlessly pounded, forcing the enemy command structure deeper underground. That is their standard operating procedure. It's their absolute last hope. He also highlighted mass desertions currently plaguing the IRGC, which makes perfect logical sense. When you watch your command and control nodes get completely vaporized from 40,000 feet, you tend to reconsider your career choices. Nobody wants to be assigned to bunker duty right now. General Keane then dropped a massive metric. U.S. and Allied forces have successfully prosecuted over 11,000 individual targets. And critically, he confirmed those first overland missions by the B-52S are actively taking place. This is a wild geopolitical development. Having the BUFF, the big ugly fat fella, executing gravity bombing runs directly over Iran means they are actively decimating entire mountainsides and heavily fortified IRGC strongholds. Deploying the B-52 with absolute air superiority, meaning they are cruising overhead without a single care in the world about high-altitude surface-to-air missiles reaching up to touch them, represents an entirely new, catastrophic level of kinetic strikes for Tehran. And this new phase just kicked off a few hours ago. The U.S. is aggressively ramping up the pressure while Iran is physically reeling. The IRGC is down there looking up, thinking, could we please not have the B-52S up there? Nothing brings a hostile regime to the negotiating table faster than the terrifying, overwhelming capability of the Stratofortress. We are talking about 70,000 pounds of mixed ordnance per aircraft. And they are hauling that payload directly over IRGC headquarters, command and control bunkers, and subterranean missile production facilities. The B-52 is essentially vacuuming up any high-value targeted desires, delivering a massive kinetic middle finger to the IRGC. Furthermore, General Keane confirmed that over 150 naval vessels belonging to the IRGC Navy have been neutralized. The B-52S are systematically vaporizing the larger surface combatants, while tactical assets like the A-10 Warthog, F-15E Strike Eagle, and F-16 Viper are aggressively strafing the remaining fast attack swarms that might still attempt to threaten the Straits of Hormuz. And by the way, CENTCOM just released this critical data point. The USS Tripoli is officially operating in the Indian Ocean as of March 29th. This is a massive amphibious assault ship named after the Battle of Derna, a legendary Marine Corps victory during the First Barbary War in 1805. So, a warship named after an 1805 legend has just rolled into the modern battle space, bringing 2,000 500 highly trained Marines directly into the theater. This deployment grants the Trump administration a massive spectrum of kinetic options. We are talking surgical, scalpel-like special operations raids, and F-35B stealth fighters blasting off the flight deck to execute immediate close air support. The tactical flexibility in the theater just multiplied exponentially. Admiral Cooper also provided a critical operational update, focusing on two fascinating domains. First, he highlighted the active air defense umbrellas currently deployed, detailing how Allied forces are continuously swatting down the desperate remnants of Iran's ballistic missile and drone arsenal. But then he pivoted to something rarely discussed: space superiority. Space dominance is absolutely massive when it comes to intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance. ISR, executing real-time battle damage assessments, and dominating the cyber warfare and orbital engagement domains. We have to acknowledge the Space Force Guardians who are actively securing the ultimate high ground every single day. Unsurprisingly, Iranian leadership is aggressively spinning this B-52 deployment while simultaneously trying to deny it even happened. If you look at the sheer size of the secondary explosions in Isfahan, their official state rhetoric claiming minor damage to military sites is hilariously desperate. They are essentially looking at a vaporized mountain and saying, "It's just a flesh wound, barely a scratch." Meanwhile, the IRGC officially confirmed the neutralization of Major General Jahanshid Eshkahi, a senior advisor to the Chief of the General Staff. Yet, they continue to vow unyielding resistance and publicly reject any realistic ceasefire framework. Certain hardline elements are still utilizing legacy outlets like Al Jazeera to broadcast that no negotiations are taking place. This directly indicates severe internal fracturing within Tehran. Nobody actually knows who is holding the reins of power right now. But these B-52 overland strikes are exactly what the airframe was engineered to do. The Stratofortress was built to systematically dismantle industrial-scale terror production facilities and deep-buried command nodes. And its next phase of operations is going to shatter everything you thought you knew about this 70-year-old aviation legend. But first, some breaking geopolitical news. President Trump explicitly stated he is not ready to simply hand over the security of the Straits of Hormuz to European allies. He pointedly reminded NATO, France, and the UK that their economies are entirely dependent on that specific oil transit. The US is energy independent. We don't strictly need that oil. Trump's message is brutally clear. If you actually want to consume this energy, you might want to step up and contribute kinetic assets to secure it. And the threat remains active. Iran is still attempting to strike global shipping. They recently hit a Kuwaiti oil tanker operating in the UAE. The strike caused a relatively large fire, but failed to destroy the vessel. However, it visually proves they are still lashing out with their suicide drones, their last, desperate vestige of offensive capability, executing the exact type of asymmetric terror tactics they are known for. President Trump subsequently posted a fiery statement on Truth Social, explicitly calling out France for refusing to allow cargo planes loaded with military supplies destined for Israel to utilize French airspace. He noted that France has been highly unhelpful regarding the neutralization of the Butcher of Iran, referring to the recently eliminated IRGC general. Trump ended the statement with a chilling promise: "The USA will remember." He also directly addressed the European nations currently experiencing jet fuel shortages due to the contested straits, specifically calling out the UK for refusing to participate in the decapitation strikes against Iran. His suggestion was blunt. Number 1, buy from the US. We have plenty. Number 2, build up some delayed courage. Go to the strait and just take it. You'll have to start learning how to fight for yourself. The USA won't be there to help you anymore, just like you weren't there for us. Iran has been essentially neutralized. The hard part is done. Go get your own oil. But after weeks of surgical suppression strikes that systematically deleted Iranian air defenses, those massive B-52s have pushed aggressively inland with total freedom of maneuver. They were highly likely the assets that leveled that massive Isfahan depot. with the chairman of the Joint Chiefs highlighting how they are now executing gravity drop missions directly over Iran proper, entirely bypassing the need for expensive standoff munitions. As witnessed in the Isfahan footage, the strikes triggered cascading fireballs, confirming direct hits on the actual weapon stockpiles, feeding the asymmetric attacks against Gulf allies and commercial shipping lanes. It is highly probable the munitions vaporized in Isfahan last night were the exact same variants of drones being prepped to target that Kuwaiti oil tanker. Consequently, Iran's capacity to project regional chaos is actively bleeding out every single day. America is currently playing by one simple rule: project overwhelming, decisive kinetic power, and utilize the B-52 as the ultimate delivery truck. President Trump dropping that verified footage was undeniable proof of U.S. resolve and a terrifying message to Tehran. Pete Hegseth reinforced those strikes, stating that the coming days will be highly decisive, noting that Iranian missile and drone launch rates have plummeted to their absolute lowest levels since the conflict initiated. But now that the B-52 has opened up the overland gravity bombing playbook, the psychological pressure on Iran is compounding exponentially. The regime is still trying to talk tough. The IRGC admitted to losing their general, yet state media continues to call a ceasefire unrealistic, promising to keep the Straits of Hormuz locked down while violently extorting any vessels they allow to pass. They continue to lob degraded, weakened missile volleys at Israel and Gulf partners. But the regime's absolute isolation is glaringly obvious, as America systematically dismantles their entire offensive toolkit, utilizing the massive payload capacity of the BUFF. If you follow football, you know sometimes the best defense is an overwhelming offense, and that is exactly what CENTCOM is executing. The B-52 is essentially the bruising running back, but instead of carrying a football, it's carrying 70,000 pounds of bunker-busting kinetic reality. We are talking 2,000-pound JDAMs, 5,000-pound penetrators. Essentially everything in the Air Force inventory can be strapped to a B-52. They are actively proving why the IRGC command structure is currently terrified to go to sleep. The B-52 essentially just kicked in Tehran's front door, and the regime has absolutely no way to stop it. When their best response, after completely losing air superiority, having their ballistic missile production gutted, and losing their drone launch capabilities, is just empty political rhetoric. Imagine how rapidly this regime is imploding internally now that B-52s are actively orbiting directly overhead. Iran's launch rates have crashed by over 90%, and the B-52s only started flying these overland missions within the last 24 hours. Debuting the B-52 Land Edition strongly indicates that the primary suppression phase of this campaign might be wrapping up over the next few weeks. The Stratofortresses are rapidly servicing a massive target list, shifting to sustained, persistent bomber orbits over sovereign Iranian territory. Tactically, this is absolute proof that Iran's strategic air defense grid is completely, utterly gutted. They might have a few manpads left, as we saw them desperately fire at an F-18. But the heavy SAMs are gone, and those massive secondary blasts in Isfahan, those were not just fireworks. They weren't just a late delivery of pyrotechnics from China. Those secondary explosions were highly likely heavy ballistic missiles that were actively threatening the region and are now nothing more than craters. The geopolitical theater impact is massive. The Straits of Hormuz choke point remains technically contested, but without the physical ammunition required to back up that threat, Iran's ability to exert control is evaporating daily. U.S. strikes are maintaining relentless pressure on their military infrastructure. America's methodical, phased approach is paying massive dividends. The B-52s are systematically plinking off hardened sites and mountain bunkers without requiring a single U.S. boot on the ground. But picture what the next wave of B-52 sorties could unleash on the surviving target list. The Stratofortress is the ultimate long-range hammer, flying from distant forward operating bases to deliver massive payloads of precision-guided bunker busters deep into subterranean facilities. They also maintain lethal standoff accuracy, capable of launching AGM, B-158 cruise missiles from safe distances before pushing in to drop gravity bombs. Because Iran's SAMs have been thoroughly neutralized, the B-52 doesn't need to be flashy. It's not the sexy, high-tech F-22 Raptor playing quarterback. It is the bruised, battered, utterly reliable running back built for exactly this type of sustained, strategic pounding. A pounding so relentless that Tehran is likely begging for a ceasefire. The United States' technological and tactical overmatch is exactly why follow-on sorties are already being generated to strike surviving missile plants, command nodes, drone factories, and coastal naval infrastructure. Which brings us to the geopolitical strategy, the 4D chess. The core doctrine here is simple. Completely degrade the enemy's ability to project power while simultaneously offering them an off-ramp. President Trump and his administration are projecting absolute clarity. Serious back-channel negotiations are reportedly occurring with what is being categorized as a more reasonable regime faction. Secretary Hegseth openly alluded to the fact that internal regime change is actively occurring. Who knows? Perhaps pragmatic elements within the IRGC are seizing control. As the hardline Ayatollah class is systematically eliminated by U.S. and Israeli precision strikes, the IRGC is the only entity left to fill that massive power vacuum. They have the guns, they control the surviving command networks, and their fingers are still on the trigger of the remaining ballistic missiles. They are the logical successors. And it appears over 20 Western-linked oil tankers have recently been permitted to transit the straits. This suggests that whoever is currently holding the reins in Tehran is finally reading the writing on the wall. They realize that without massive concessions, they will be completely vaporized, paving the way for the next faction to negotiate with Washington. It's a brutal game of survival. If they refuse to negotiate, they are walking straight off a kinetic cliff. They understand that refusal equals vaporization. We will see if the surviving IRGC leadership possesses the strategic pragmatism to actually negotiate. Systematically amputating their terror proxies is another massive component of stripping away their leverage. Essentially, when the B-52 shows up uninvited, it stays exactly as long as it wants. And even the most fanatical regime will start aggressively rethinking its life choices when a Stratofortress is orbiting overhead. And, oh, by the way, 2,500 heavily armed Marines are currently loitering in the region, actively positioned for potential ground operations in Iran. The B-52s are actively preparing the battle space for any specialized maneuvers CENTCOM deems necessary. This overwhelming pressure is highly likely suppressing any hardline resurgence, hopefully paving the way for a pragmatic faction to finally come to the negotiating table. Watching their command and control fracture and their ability to threaten global shipping degrade daily is taking its toll. They obviously managed a desperate potshot at that Kuwaiti tanker today, but tactically, this does not look like an endless war. We could be looking at a swift, decisive, kinetic closeout over the next few weeks or months. What is your tactical assessment for the next 2 weeks? Let me know in the comments below. Wrapping up this briefing, the B-52. That 70-year-old heavy hitter that is still absolutely jacked, is actively dropping massive tonnage on Iran, executing unopposed stand-in missions. The Stratofortress is proving exactly why it remains the absolute backbone of American air power and the global bomber force, delivering overwhelming precision, power, and resolve. The best defense is a devastating offense. And the B-52 is actively crushing Iran's launch rates, defending global allies, and keeping the crosshairs locked on military infrastructure. At this point, the mullahs have a snowball's chance in hell of surviving unless they cut a deal. Hopefully, this emerging, pragmatic faction understands the absolute reality of their situation, and the B-52 is orbiting right above them to ensure they do. As a reminder, all tactical analysis and intelligence provided on Titan Mechanics is strictly for educational and documentary purposes. We analyze geopolitical strategy and military hardware based on publicly available open-source data. We do not glorify conflict or incite real-world action. Stay informed. Stay analytical. and we will see you on the next briefing.